guys, so today I'm doing my May wrap-up. So I didn't get through all the books that I had planned on reading this month, but I definitely did plow through that reading slump that I was having, and I read a lot of interesting books this month, so I was really proud of that. So I read a total of 3 books, and let's get started and talk about the 3 that I read. So the first book is Cities I've Never Lived In by Sarah Majka. And this book was really interesting. I talked about it a little bit on my May TBR, but basically it's a collection of short stories mainly focusing on a female who recently got divorced and telling her stories kind of during her marriage and after her marriage, and also a few stories in between of people she encountered or she knew of that kind of also are dealing with divorce or pretty dramatic issues in their life. And so this book puts you in a pretty depressing mood, I will say that. But I find that that's like a really good thing, that the writing could put me in that mood, and I find that a really good quality of writers that can actually put you in the mood of the book. So that was really enjoyable, even though it was a pretty depressing story. The book took me a lot longer than I expected, because the stories are very slow. Like, if you're looking for something very action-packed, this is definitely not the book for you. It's a very mundane stories. I mean, the issues that they go through are pretty stressful and dramatic, but there's not a lot happening in these stories. So it was a little hard to read. I kept getting a little distracted at times, but overall, I think I preferred the main girl's storyline more than the little stories in between. And then it was kind of confusing at some points because her stories are like interconnected into the other people's stories, so at some points I wasn't sure whether or not I was reading her story or reading a different person's story, so that was a little confusing. And I kind of would have preferred if it was one continuous story of just her instead of just a collection of short stories. But I found the writing to be really mesmerizing. She does a really good job of taking like really small details that the characters remember from their past and like bringing that up and in a way that's very real and natural feeling. There was a lot of interesting themes in this story of being lost, or people who are physically disappearing in a lot of the different stories, and then other characters are always constantly looking for some sort of familiarity. And it's just a very interesting story for people who are looking for home or what home means to them, and I found that very interesting in the story. So I definitely would recommend it to people that do enjoy like literary short fiction, but if you're more into something more action-packed, I wouldn't recommend this. Her style of writing, in a way, is kind of like Raymond Carver, where she's talking about, you know, just people, everyday people living their lives with a touch of like eerie creepiness in some of the stories, but for the most part, they're very just normal stories and that take place in Portland, Maine for the most part. Yeah, so if you're interested in that kind of type of writing, a little more descriptive, I would say, than Raymond Carver, but so if you're really interested in that kind of writing, I would recommend it. If you're looking for something with a little more, I guess, drama, action-packed, these are definitely not the kind of stories you will enjoy. I just really enjoyed it and thought it was pretty interesting. So the second book that I read this month is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, and this book I really enjoyed. I've only read one other book from him, and it was The Remains of the Day, which is kind of like about a butler, you know, right at that point in British history where that kind of lifestyle is dying, and so he is like the last kind of butler, and it kind of follows, it's almost similar to like Downton Abbey. I was watching Downton Abbey for a lot and craving like something very similar to that, so I picked up his book, The Remains of the Day, and it's a very interesting book, but this is completely different. Like his writing style is very similar, but the content is completely different. This is more of a fictional story. There's ogres, dragons. It's kind of like takes place in this kind of like after the King Arthur has passed away, in this kind of mythical valley where there's Britons and Saxons, and they're kind of in this time of peace. These old couple are kind of realizing that there's a lot of memories that they keep forgetting, and they realize that they have this son and they want to go to visit him at his town. So they start this journey to find their son, and it kind of goes from there, and they veer off into this adventure, joining this hunter and this little boy. So it's a very interesting story. It's kind of, in the beginning, it kind of starts off really slow, and the way it's narrated is a little weird, being narrated from this unknown character that it never really gets told, but it's kind of a, what's the word? It's kind of like you're one step outside of the characters. You're looking on at the characters instead of actually like feeling what they feel. So that what made me feel a little separated from the characters. But and the story was just very, very slow going from the beginning. You kind of don't know what direction the story is going to take, and then when you get to like about 2/3 of the way into the story, you're kind of like, oh, I'm finally understanding what's going on. And then it brings up a lot of interesting issues about war, peace, what people are willing to do to gain a sense of peace, whether or not it's like a true sense of peace or just this kind of veil that you cover over everything. So I think it's really interesting. In a way, it kind of deals with, I guess, race or religion, or just being how you deal with people that are different than you and culturally different, ethnically different. The kind of veil that we put between ourselves and thinking, oh, everything's okay. But when we really look harder, those relationships are very non-existent at all, or very strained. So it's a really interesting book. I really, really enjoyed it and highly recommend it to anyone, really. I think fantasy lovers will enjoy it, non-fantasy lovers will enjoy it, because there's this very literary aspect to this story. And it was just really interesting, and I thought it was going to be boring because you're literally following this old couple, like this elderly couple. So when I kind of started, I was like, what's gonna happen? It really turned out to be a very interesting story, and I absolutely love it. It's probably one of my favorite stories that I've read this year so far. So the last book that I finished this month is called The Dragon's Blade by Michael Miller, and I will be having a complete full review on this book, so I don't want to say too much. But first impressions, I really enjoyed this book. I can't wait to see what's coming next, and it was just super interesting and very unique. Like, usually when you get into a fantasy story, you kind of find very similar tropes or kind of scenes that play out in a lot of different stories, but this, like, it was a very original plot. I absolutely love that about this story. So I'm glad I got to read this book. But yeah, I will be doing a full review on this book very soon, I can promise you. And I really loved it. So those are all the books that I got to this month. I'm a little disappointed in the amount of books, but I'm also happy that I really got to read some interesting stories because it got me out of my reading slump. So I'm excited to see what this month brings, but let me know what you guys read this month, or if you have any suggestions of what I should read in the month of June. If you guys read any of these stories and want to talk to me about them, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye. Really great books out there that don't get the love and attention that they deserve.